Welcome back. This is day 3 of your respiratory system. So today's aim is how can we differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic exercise? Now, I believe we saw these words last week, and I think that we all came to the conclusion that this word at the beginning, AER, kind of looks a lot like a word we know called air, AIR. And we also said that whenever we see this word a or an in front of a word, that means without. So without what? Let's find out. But before we get started, you guys have got a do now to answer. There are 3 sentences with some blanks that we need to fill in with missing vocabulary words. So go ahead and pause this video, fill in those missing blanks, and press play when you're ready to review it. So the first sentence says, blank is used as a source of energy for our cells. Anytime we're talking about cellular energy, we're talking about ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. Okay, this molecule is produced by the process of cellular respiration. Okay, and this process uses oxygen and glucose to produce carbon dioxide, water, and most importantly, energy in the form of ATP. So we know this, right? We know cellular respiration. We take in oxygen and glucose, they go into the mitochondria, they produce energy, yay. But what if I told you there's a way that your body can produce energy even without oxygen? Let's find out. All right, so that brings us to our passage. What is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise? So as always, whenever we're reading through a passage, I want you guys to highlight or annotate anything you think is important, and we're going to use that information to answer a question that follows. So let's get started. What is the difference? In simplest terms, the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise comes down to oxygen. With aerobic exercise, oxygen is carried through your breath to the muscles, giving them energy needed to sustain the effort. Oxygen is not present with anaerobic exercise. So now let's revisit those 2 words we saw at the beginning. When we're talking about aerobic respiration or aerobic exercise, we're talking about the process that occurs with oxygen. It occurs in the presence of oxygen. But when we see this word anaerobic, we're talking about the opposite. It's a process that occurs without oxygen. Okay, so aerobic exercise. Exercise requires energy. When we exercise aerobically, our bodies use glycogen, which is glucose that is stored in the liver and muscle cells, and fat as fuel. This low to moderate level of exertion can be sustained over long periods. As you breathe more heavily with exertion, carbon dioxide is expelled from your body. Lactic acid is not produced as it is with anaerobic exercise. Aerobic exercises burn fat, improve mood, strengthen the heart and lungs, and reduce your risk of diabetes. Aerobic exercises typically include running at a comfortable pace, swimming, and biking. Okay, so aerobic exercise is pretty moderate, low to moderate levels of exertion. Okay, you're not overworking your body in this case. Aerobic exercise is where our body likes to be. We like to perform aerobic respiration, where we take in oxygen, we use that to produce energy, everything's good, we maintain homeostasis. But sometimes our body performs something called anaerobic respiration. And that is where our body produces energy without the presence of oxygen. And we typically see this when we undergo something called anaerobic exercise. So let's read about that. Oxygen is not present with anaerobic exercise. When we exercise anaerobically, glycogen is used as fuel. Once all of the glycogen has been depleted, Once all of the glycogen has been depleted, usually in about 2 hours, you can expect to hit a proverbial wall, which means you're going to get really, really tired really, really fast. So endurance athletes avoid this performance buster by doing something called carbo loading before exercise, which is basically they'll eat like a big bowl of pasta the night before a run. And that's because when those carbs are converted to sugar, it gives them more energy. And they can also take supplements during exercise to sustain energy for longer periods. During anaerobic exercise, your body builds up lactic acid, which causes discomfort and fatigue at sustained levels. So that's the reason why if you ever run really, really fast, you might start to get a leg cramp. Okay, that is lactic acid building up in your muscles. So for this reason, anaerobic exercise or high intensity exercise happens in short bursts. It may be helpful to consider the difference between a sprinter, which is an anaerobic exercise, and a marathon runner, which is aerobic. Sprinting is an all-out effort that is sustained for a comparatively short period of time, while marathoning is a sustained effort for a longer period of time. During anaerobic exercise, calories are burned more efficiently in bodies that have more muscle. This exercise also helps to build lean muscle mass a great deal, and it also helps to build endurance and fitness levels. These exercises typically include weightlifting, sprinting, and other high intensity exercises. So you might be wondering, but Ms. Collins, like even when I'm sprinting and even when I'm lifting weights, I'm still breathing, I'm still getting oxygen. And you're right, but your body's not getting enough oxygen. You're doing a really, really high intensity exercise in a short period of time. And because of that, you're using up all of your body's ATP before it has the chance to create more using the oxygen that you've just inhaled. So you're essentially overexerting your body. And that's why we have to do it in a pretty short amount of time. Okay. But let's go over those differences one more time. So I've got a chart on your paper outlining the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise. So again, aerobic means with air, which means it's in the presence of oxygen. Because of that, it's a pretty moderate intensity workout. You can handle it for a long period of time. This develops stamina and it burns calories during the activity. But with anaerobic exercises, you're doing a really, really hard workout really, really fast. And this is done in the absence of oxygen, so it's high intensity. Because of this, you can only handle it for a pretty short amount of time, but this is going to develop force and burn calories even when your body is at rest. Okay, so now let's figure out, why are anaerobic exercises done in short bursts of time? All right, go ahead and pause this video. Why are anaerobic exercises done for only a short period of time? All right, hopefully you got that anaerobic exercises cause your body to build up something called lactic acid, which causes discomfort and fatigue at sustained levels. So lactic acid is the reason your muscles burn while or after you work out. So if you ever do a really heavy weight training technique, then the next day you're probably going to be really, really sore. That soreness is caused by lactic acid building up inside of your muscles, okay? Because this is a product of anaerobic respiration, that respiration that's done without oxygen. Okay. So now let's review those differences one more time. So aerobic respiration, I want you guys to fill in, this is when the body is able to supply the cells with oxygen and glucose. Cellular respiration here occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. And this is a slower process, but it makes more ATP than anaerobic respiration. Okay, so aerobic respiration occurs with oxygen. So the blanks you're filling in are oxygen, mitochondria, and more. Okay, but then we have something called anaerobic respiration. And remember, this is when we're doing that high intensity workout where you're not able to bring in as much oxygen as your cells need at that moment, but we still have to make energy. So to do that, this happens when the body is unable to supply the cells with oxygen needed to break down glucose. It occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, and this is a faster process, right? You're in a time crunch. You have to get more energy while you're in that high intensity workout. But the downside is it makes less ATP than aerobic respiration. Okay, so this is done without oxygen. And it's done when your body needs to make that quick energy in that high intensity workout where your body's not getting enough oxygen, but we still have to make ATP and we still have to make it through that workout. So that's when your body utilizes anaerobic respiration. Okay. And one more time, I think you guys have to have a space to fill in lactic acid on your worksheets. I want you guys to write down that lactic acid is an organic compound produced during muscle contraction as a product of anaerobic exercise. And this is what causes muscle cramps. So again, lactic acid is a product of anaerobic exercise, meaning it's that exercise done without oxygen. And this is why your muscles are really, really sore after a workout. You do not need to draw this on your paper. That's just an example. All right, now, you might find this hard to believe, but we aren't the only organism that undergo anaerobic respiration. In fact, yeast cells also undergo anaerobic respiration during times when oxygen is low or absent. However, unlike humans, they do not produce lactic acid. Instead, their product of anaerobic respiration is something called ethanol, which you might know as alcohol. So, this alcohol is what's used in wines and other spirits. That is the product of anaerobic respiration in yeast. Pretty cool. Now, on your paper, we've already talked about this before, but I do want to quickly review some of the disorders of the respiratory system before I tell you about one more that you may have heard of. Okay, again, 3 disorders of the respiratory system we need to know are asthma. Asthma is when the bronchial tubes are constricted due to muscle contractions. So those muscles contract and restrict the airflow of the bronchial tubes. This narrows the passageway for air to flow to the lungs. So it becomes really difficult for these people to breathe because the air pathways are much, much smaller. So a lot of people in my classes today talked about how they typically have asthma attacks like when they're exercising because the muscles of those bronchial tubes contract and make it really difficult for them to breathe. Okay, a second disorder is something called bronchitis. Now this is a little bit different. This is when we see inflammation of the bronchial tubes that causes mucus buildup. So you can see here, those bronchial tubes are filled with mucus. And again, this makes it very difficult to breathe, causes a lot of coughing, and this is most often caused by viral infections. Okay, and the third disorder we need to know is something called emphysema. This is the gradual reduction and breakdown of alveoli in the lungs. And remember, alveoli are where we see that process of gas exchange. Let's see if I can squeeze this in here. Okay, it is almost exclusively caused by smoking. This usually results in coughing up blood and pieces of your lungs due to alveoli death. So that's gross. Let's not smoke so that none of us end up with emphysema. Oof. Again, this makes it really, really difficult to breathe because the site of gas exchange starts disintegrating, which makes it really difficult for you to utilize those lungs to their full capacity. But the fourth disorder we need to know is something that you've probably heard of, and that is called COVID-19. This is a respiratory infection caused by the coronavirus. And this is pretty unique because people show many different symptoms. There are a lot of symptoms that have been reported, including shortness of breath, coughing, wheezing, loss of smell and or taste, fatigue, muscle weakness, congestion, nausea, diarrhea, and in some cases, death. But what's also unique is that some people are asymptomatic, meaning that they don't show any symptoms at all. So you wouldn't even know that they were sick. Okay, and this is super contagious, as I'm sure you know, because it's passed through respiratory droplets from breathing. This is airborne. So remember that we've talked about with cellular respiration, your body produces a little bit of water vapor every time your muscles are producing energy, or your cells are producing energy rather. But that water vapor is exhaled through your mouth. And that is how COVID-19 is spread, is when you accidentally sneeze or spit a little bit while you're talking. Those respiratory droplets contain that virus that are then spread to whoever you are talking to. And what's crazy is that if you see in this graphic right here, a single sneeze can produce up to 10,000 droplets. 10,000 droplets that could contain that virus. And that virus is going to become airborne, which means those particles float through the air and land on anything and everything around you. And those viral particles can actually live on those surfaces for a while. So here you see that if those droplets land on surfaces, the virus may survive for as long as 24 hours on cardboard and up to 3 days on stainless steel and plastic surfaces. Okay, so that is why COVID-19 has been super, super, super contagious, is because every time you talk to someone, those droplets are spreading the virus around you. So be careful, wash your hands, wear a mask, and stay in your house, stay away from people. People are gross. All right, so using that information, go ahead and fill out your exit ticket for today. And as always, send me a message on Remind if you have any questions about this content. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.